And we're live at the ThunderCast. Joining me as always is Marmaduke
Hey, howdy, hey.
and Couch Boys.
Hey, how's it going?
And I am, unfortunately as always, Lio Convoy. So we're going to have a pretty simple one this time. We are going to go through somehow the entirety of the Anointment Trials. Then we are going to cover the character Zaxx, as it was requested 2 months ago. And we are going to do two of the comic stories from the 1990 UK annual, The Price of Pride and The Homecoming. So let's go ahead and start talking about the Anointment Trials. I'll go ahead and do the setup here for everybody. The Anointment Trials start with Lionel waking up on what I'm guessing is his 21st birthday. And he realizes that he's been allowed to sleep in later. And he is suspecting some sort of birthday surprise between somewhere of excitement and irritation. And he just finds out he has a massive breakfast for him ready. And he finds out he has to go through what's called the Anointment Trials, meaning he has to best the other Thundercats in their area of specialty throughout the week. And he has to do so without the Sword of Omens. And if he survives the week, he will be the properly anointed Lord of the Thundercats, whereas currently he is only the hereditary one. This is something that every Thundercat Lord has to overcome if they are to be properly anointed as Lord of the Thundercats. So, Couch, why don't you go ahead and tell us what your thoughts are of this 5-part episode?
The one thing that I really liked about it is, it really gave us insight onto Lino's character as a. Correct me if I'm wrong. I thought the wiki said he was 20. He could be 21, but either way, just a 20-year-old kid, basically. And I say this as a 20-year-old who has no idea what the hell he's doing. Like, I mean, yeah, he has to use his resourcefulness a lot, but just like especially in the trial of Speed, where he has to take the more dangerous route because he knows he can't outspeed Chitara. Just like getting into his head and seeing his thought process in which he kind of just wings everything. It all happens to work out, and there is a process to it, but I just think it's really interesting to see his actual thought process and like how he deals with these situations.
All right, well, we'll go through every episode individually, but Marm, what's your overall thoughts about this 5-part series?
Maybe tying into what Couch said, I like how there's variety in each trial. He doesn't overcome each of the other Thundercats in quite the same way. There's also a lot of thought given, I think, to some of the secondary plots that he has. So he's always competing with one of the other noble houses of the Thundercats, but he'll also encounter the warrior women. He'll encounter different parts of the land that we haven't seen before, and it's also really thoughtful in that when he competes with them, they're also testing different attributes. Like, one of the things that got me thinking is, well, what's the difference between being cunning and being intelligent? And it's almost like by having variety in each episode, you kind of get the sense that they're testing different aspects of his character. So the cunning test is a little bit more of a test of just like, how bright is he, how quick on the uptake is he, and the intelligence test was almost more focused, more about overcoming fears. So I really think there was excellent thought into having the characters' personalities relate to the actual actions that Lion-O has to do to beat each of them.
All right, well, I find it very interesting because this isn't something that was normal for 80s cartoons in general, to where the leader character had to prove through other people, or rather through his own teammates, that he's fit to lead. And one would usually look at this and say, well, it's just some macho contest. But the truth of the matter is, when it comes to leadership, specifically in a team like this, the purpose of Lion-O doing this, I don't believe, is necessarily to prove that he's better than them, because even he made that statement beforehand. It's a competent leader understands the strengths and weaknesses of the people that he leads. And in this case, Lion-O has to understand the strengths of the other Thundercats ahead of him, and how in the world would he utilize that, and how in the world, in the case of some areas, how would he subvert that. With Panthro, it was a test of strength. So it wasn't just martial prowess or physical ability. When he was taking the weight from the rock, it was also strength of character. If we let this thing go, it's going to destroy things. So what does Lion-O do? He takes up the mantle and he moves it himself because Panthro's injured. When it comes to the trial of speed, sure, Chitaro's a lot faster, but Lion-O had to choose a faster route, and he had to do so using his own intelligence and having to just brave the unknown. For the trial of cunning, he had to outsmart the Wily twins in their own real way. And I have to say, I do like the detail that somehow the map on the cavern somehow magically is the shape of the Thundercat emblem. But
well, they clearly made it with all their gobs of free time.
Right.
So, and then we get, of course, the Tigra's Trial of the Mind, where Lion-O has to face his biggest fear. And honestly, planetary destruction, that's it's a pretty big fear if you got to face it when you're freaking 12 years old. And
Yeah.
we'll say... Go ahead.
Yours.
Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just saying, especially if it's yours. If I'm just messing around and I see some other planet blow up, I'm like, oh, okay, that happened. But if it was Earth, I'd probably be pretty upset.
And of course, we'll talk more about specifically the Trial of Evil here shortly. But do you guys have any specific thoughts concerning the individual trials and what you guys think concerning what happened within them?
Do you want us to just go through them one at a time, maybe?
Sure.
All right. So the Trial of Strength, I think this is one of the most important, Lion-O needs to grow up episodes in the series, where he initially just doesn't want to do it. And I was interested that they didn't tell him about this. And Snarf's explanation for this is that you have to, a good leader has to be able to expect the unexpected. So he's really just kind of like a little kid. He gets up on his birthday and he's excited for his birthday and where is everybody? And then he's immediately thrust into this really difficult thing for him where he doesn't want to fight his friends. He almost kind of throws a mini tantrum over this where he refuses to fight Panthro until Panthro fights him. And I loved the detail that Panthro was ready to say blast the code and save Lion-O's life, but that was the moment where Lion-O kind of puts two and two together that I do need to overcome these problems to be a leader. So it was sort of fortune intervenes and makes Lion-O figure out for himself why this is an important tradition. It isn't just enough for the adults to say, "Come on, Lion-O, this is an important tradition." He has to figure out the reason for himself, and once he does, then he overcomes it. And he actually finds out that competing with your friends isn't the same as fighting with your friends. There's a healthy or a decent aspect to competing with your friends.
Yeah, to kind of hinge on the importance of the tradition thing, the one thing that I really like that they did that I think really drove it home was the fact that throughout the entire special, it's very heavily implied that none of the Thundercats want to go through it. None of them want to put Lion-O through that because he's, their friend, but because it is so important to him and important to his development that they have to do it anyway. And I think that really, really drives home the significance of it. But for Trials of Strength overall, the one thing I really like was, I think Lio talked about this earlier, was how Lion-O was technically able to beat the trial without beating Panthro technically, because what he did, he saved the Wallow village from the rock. And I think that was really clever. So it wasn't, instead of just, Lion-O going and, beating the hell out of Panthro for 10 minutes, we really got to see Lion-O's sense of empathy. Because what he did with moving the rock, or holding the rock back, I should say, he saved the Wallow village and he protected Panthro because I believe Panthro was injured by it somehow.
Yeah, he got injured by another rock falling.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I really liked that.
One thing I do have to say that I did find funny is Snarf's telling him, you have to fight the other Thundercats, and for a while he's just all right, and then he says, by the way, Panthro's first, and Lion-O's like, wait a minute, what? Panthro!
No, I'm gonna get my ass whooped.
I can't start with the Thunder Kittens. Some warm-up round.
Work my way up.
Can't do the trial of strength with the Thunder Kittens. Come on.
God. But no, that was a nice bit of levity. There are in specific episodes, like what I liked in say Trial of Speed is when Lion-O's trying to find a way down river and the warrior maidens show up and he's like, no, you can't help me. And then one of them's like, oh, I didn't think he was like that. Freaking misogynist. Don't want help from women, huh?
He's like, ugh, man.
That's an entire
On
mood.
one hand, I kind of wish the warrior maiden's character was a little more than ugh, men, but like that was really funny.
Watch out for the gore rock. I'm sorry, the what?
What? I can't hear you.
It's always nice to get one of these other supporting characters' take on the Thundercats and their antics, right? Like, there's always a cultural division between them and the others.
Yes. And there's a lot of fun that just went into this, not just in entertainment value, but also to see how he'd overcome things, like having to hijack. And I didn't know, of course, when you're first watching it, I thought that was a regular-sized vulture until he lassoed it and it carried him, and I saw how freaking big that thing was. Like, holy crap, that's a massive bird. Good Lord.
Yeah, I mean, if he tried to use a regular one, I mean, he's a big boy. That bird, they would have both been dead.
True. But who just keeps an acid late hanging around there?
And thank goodness that Lion-O learned to look before he leaps in previous episodes, or that would have been a fast end of the series.
Yes.
A couple little things I noticed in the Trial of Speed. I like the detail of Chitara waking up and kind of stretching like a cat. I don't know. This is cute, having a cat-like aspect to it. And the line where Tigra was saying, I didn't think that he was a quitter. And then immediately Lion-O keeps running and Tigra says, I never doubted him for a second.
Yeah. Yeah, especially since it's preceded by Lion-O being like, oh man, I don't want to do this. I'm going to quit. And then Tigra's like, oh man, he's going to quit. Lion-O's like, no, I'm not, psych. Tigra's like, oh, I knew it.
What I really... Go ahead.
It was well framed because at the start of the episode, Jaga tells him, "You will fail if you give up before you even try." So I'm sure that when they had the child psychologist giving his perspective, they were considerate about having that be a theme for the entire episode. They didn't just drop it at the end, basically.
Mm-hmm. And I like Yeah, it's like John was saying here. I may lose, but it won't be because I gave up. That's a good mentality to have, especially in adversity. So it was a really well written episode. Unfortunately, the trials, their animation gets a little wonky, especially near the end. I don't know what happened there. But moving on to the trial of... One
last thing. I absolutely love the detail where Lion-O told Chitara, you threw the race. And she said, how dare you? Lion-O, that was great.
Yeah.
I like also the nod to, real world big cats, because a cheetah, that was directly because a cheetah cannot maintain its own top speed for too long because it literally would cook its own brain. They generate too much heat running at 60, 70 miles an hour. So that was a nice little nod that Chitara couldn't do that the entire time. So... moving on to the Trial of Cunning, what they did with Cunning is really not just you gotta out-trick the Wily twins, you gotta think and be ahead of them like you would any opponent, but also the added world building of these creatures with all these books and they can't even read them because their eyesight's gone.
I'm gonna interrupt here. Oh my god, those things just... I don't like them at all. They looked at me and I almost fell out of my chair because I forgot that they were a thing. Because I haven't watched these since I was 12. I was just staring at my screen in disgust. I'm like, okay, cool. I guess I'm watching a horror movie now. That's great. I especially hate the line where they're all just kind of slowly creeping up on Lion-O and the kid like, we're going to keep you down here until your eyes are like ours. I was like,
There would have been a real easy way for Lion-O to solve that. He would have just sat down and said, Dipper goes to Taco Bell by the Crystal Cycle. It was a normal day in Gravity.
Oh my god.
They
He
never
could
asked-
just read the collection of 58 ThunderCats creepypastas that me and one of my Twitter friends found.
Oh, we need to go over those sometime, but go ahead, Marm.
This episode of ThunderCats was sponsored by Audible.com.
Well, I mean, it's better than a normal sponsor. BatheInMyMilk.com is getting a little creepy.
Oh, good grief.
No.
BatheInMyMilk.com for all your milk bathing needs. But no, the fact that he was willing to save, you saved their book, so they saved him, and you never really see them again in so much as the series, but showing that empathy is also really nice. But what I really liked is how Lion-O wound up tricking the twins at the very end by tying them together by a rock. That was funny.
Yeah.
He beats them at their own game.
Yes.
It was really nice that he anticipated a lot of their tricks, and the one thing he couldn't do was just go win the race, but potentially risk the fact that they could die, right? So what it showed is like two characters whose key weapon is that they're deceitful and tricky. He didn't want to believe that they'd be lying about being in real danger, and so he wants to go and check to make sure they're not in real danger, even if it means he loses the Anointment Trials. That's a great heroic moment for him.
And another great heroic moment is at the end there, before they started, he could have easily just picked up them kids and yeeted them a few feet behind him, but he chose not to. It's like, yeet!
Wanted to win in style, or not at all.
Speaking of yeet, I love the part where he finds the cardboard cutouts of them going down the river, because it was supposed to look like their shadows. And he's just like, darn, they sure did get me. And then he just picks up the cardboard and just smashes it against the wall.
Dagnabbit!
Damn it!
But no, having to deal with crafty kids before myself, I can understand the frustration. So that's why it's a bit humorous of thinking, you're a grown man. You literally just won the Trial of Strength. You can use this to your advantage. Throw the kids. Go.
Go to your room. No tricks today.
You're grounded.
But moving on, we then had the Trial of Mind Power, where we find out that Tigra can cast illusion, something that never comes up again, but at the same time, it makes sense that they didn't bring that up, because, I was saving it for the Anointment Trials, and then he uses it, and he's like, oh, wait, oops, I'm not supposed to use it this way. I forgot.
Yeah, my whole thing with that, I honestly believe that the whole Tigra hasn't used his illusion powers before because they're just too taxing on him. His head would pop or something. Used him for too long. While it's a decent enough explanation, I kind of feel like it was more of a cover story for the writers, just not really knowing what to make Tigra's trial about.
Well, that might be true, because, alright, so Panthro's obvious, right? He's a leopard, so he's strong. Chitara, obvious. Twins, obvious. Tigra's the architect. Is he going to challenge Lion-O to building something? You can't challenge him to... You could try, I guess, challenge him...
Minecraft PvP.
Go ahead.
Minecraft PvP.
Don't you start. So... What do? You base it, you build it more on, what big cat is he? He's a tiger, okay? Tigers have stripes. Why do tigers have stripes? To blend in and also to fool other things. So, easily extrapolated into some form of illusion. Goes a little bit far, a little bit crazy, where he thinks he's flying into freaking space. But I can understand why they'd go that direction with Tigra. I just wish, later on, say, Chitara's Sixth Sense, they would have used it more. But
tie it in with things.
Yeah, that would have been nice to see.
Looking at this episode on its own, I love the idea of challenging Lion-O with a fear he doesn't even realize he had. Like he's been having nightmares about this destruction of Thundera, and he's so afraid of it that he hasn't even recognized this as a fear he actually has yet. He initially assumes, well, I don't know, I'm not afraid of anything, and then it's reliving that nightmare. That's almost like a thing a bad guy would do to a hero, and then the hero has to overcome their fear. And it's not really clear to me, is Tigra deliberately giving him this vision, or do Tigra's powers work in a way where he just, like, I don't know, gets in your head and then you create the vision for yourself? But there's almost something really nice about a friend forcing him to confront a fear he's always had, but has never really been brave enough or mature enough to recognize this is a fear. So one of the best, like you can see when I mentioned earlier how this contrasts with the Trial of Cunning with the kits, that was like a little bit of, trickiness, like thinking fast on your feet. But this is almost a little bit more like becoming a man. Like if I were Lion-O, I would never be a little kid after an experience like that, because it's basically confronting the darkest thing in your entire life.
Yeah.
To kind of expand on that, the one thing that I really liked was the fact that Tigra was willing to make Lion-O essentially relive a PTSD flashback. Just shows how much faith Tigra has in him as a leader. Because, I mean, the way I see it, if he really, truly didn't think Lion-O was going to be able to do it, I don't see him being able to go through with it.
Nah, I don't think Tigra would have been able to. And I have to say, I do like Lion-O's gusto at the end of it. Not only does he declare he'll no longer be afraid, but his response is, I'm going to charge through the exploding planet, and I'm going to go beat up Tigra.
And he gets him in like 10 seconds. I know why you learned for the trial of strength, you silly boy.
Just throws him and gets him in a headlock or an arm lock. Tiger's like, all right, it's enough. I'm exhausted. I'm not even going to try. I'm done.
Shove the poor man in a locker.
He's like, you rest here, Tigra. I'll come back for your insignia later. And he, like, flinches at him to see if he moves. Yes, what I thought. All right, so now we get on to the fifth trial, the Trial of Evil, which I found really fascinating because while it only expanded a little bit in further books, you don't know much about any other trial beforehand in terms of, like, ancestors. So you find out in the Wildstorm Heroes and Villains that Lion-O's father had to kill his own father for Trial of Evil, but that was a mess in and of itself. So what Lord of the Thundercats has dealt with something as literally evil as Mum-Ra? Nobody had a clue. Scary Harpy. How would they have done that on Thundera? I'd imagine the Lord of the Thundercats there would have probably picked a fight with the biggest, ugliest mutant in the area. Just my guess. Because it's not... The Trial of Evil isn't meant to attack a monolith of evil itself. This is something that only could have happened on Third Earth because Mum-Ra exists there. But the trial's purpose is to confront their deadliest enemy. So on Thundera, it would have been a mutant, or it would have been anything else. And yes, mutants were on Plundar, but they had interplanetary travel. Again, it's your deadliest enemy. So Lion-O had to fight Mum-Ra. Well, had he ever fought him before without the sword? No, because it's kind of difficult to fight a mystical being without a weapon to defend yourself. And I find Lion-O's choice of when to confront Mum-Ra to be kind of odd. And I think that was just to give himself added challenge for whatever reason. He said, a creature of darkness should be facing darkness. And I'm thinking, wouldn't it be wiser to fight him in the daytime when he's less comfortable about coming out? Maybe drag him out of the sarcophagus, beating him a little bit? But I guess Lion-O just feeling his jimmies a little bit there. What's your thoughts, Couch?
Honestly, I was a little bit disappointed by this episode. I know you were talking about the animation kind of petered off in terms of quality towards the end of the trials, but
yeah.
What ended up saving the Trial of Mind Power for me is that the story was really, really solid. It's like, okay, so Lion-O looks pretty off model from like scene to scene, but like I'm engaged in the story, so it doesn't really matter. Honestly, I felt that Trial of Evil didn't really have that. It kind of just felt like about 20 minutes of Mum-Ra just kind of screwing around with Lion-O a bit. I mean, we got introduced to a couple one-off characters who like never appear again, like the ferryman who like gets all this build up and then dies immediately.
He had it coming.
Lion-O yeets him into the water. Yeah. But and I felt like the fight at the end was just kind of anticlimactic because if I'm remembering it correctly, it seemed like the only reason why Lion-O won was because of chance. Like he just happened to run behind the sarcophagus to hide, and the sarcophagus got hit. And
But
he's
then
just like, oh,
he picked it up and threw it. So he did have
yeah,
to figure out, oh, if I hurt the sarcophagus, I can hurt Mum-Ra. So it was chance that showed him he can do that, but he still had to put two and two together.
right.
I mean, you're not wrong, but outside of that, how in the world would you? You'd have to either outlast Mum-Ra or find some other way to deal with him. And when you're literally in his home, when he's at the peak of his power, what else can you do? Hope he shows a flaw. And that's what
True.
Mum-Ra did. And of course, even Leonard Starr in the show notes said, well, you can't kill him. You got to bring him back. So Mum-Ra comes back by the end of the episode, but that one moment or one sequence where there are no more dark clouds over the pyramid, it's just a normal day, that was kind of unsettling because it's like, all right, I know that the other way is supposed to be unnatural, but this feels more unnatural.
Yeah, it's like if you're in Cleveland and it's sunny out, it's like, what is this?
Also, I have to admit, watching Lion-O like murk all of Mum-Ra's quote-unquote devil forms on his way to fight Mum-Ra was pretty amusing. Takes out the ferryman,
Right,
takes out the Inflamer, who showed up again for some reason. Just like, no mercy. Good lord.
Yeah, just like the ferryman just grabs him, yeets him into the water. Ferryman's like, ah, and then dies.
A little bit like the river Styx from Greek mythology.
Yeah.
This episode would have creeped me out when I was a kid. Like, it's basically Lion-O running and fighting several increasingly freaky dudes in a row. It's a little freaky how the ferryman is kind of an empty cloak with no face, kind of like, vaguely like a ring wraith from Lord of the Rings. The Incubi freaked me the heck out because it's got like this caterpillar body and long Legend of Zelda rip your face off mouth and long spaghetti arms. Like, oh man, no.
I'm remembering that thing now too. It almost looks like something that artist by the name of Trevor Henderson would draw. He's become pretty popular on Twitter.
And I know a lot of people are bringing up Moff Tet, the Lynx god that showed up in that first part of the episode. I think it was funny. Lion was like, I am no thief. And I'm thinking in the back of my head, no, you're just here to murder the guy who owns the pyramid. I mean, he's evil, so fair enough, but still.
It's neat that it's neat that he's a cat, so we get that cool connection again between, anytime the Thundercats run into a big cat, it seemed like almost like they have like a mental affinity with one another, and kind of this creepy thing of you can be a god, but you can still be basically wasting away in Mum-Ra's world.
Well, yeah, no worship will tend to do that for these people.
My thing that confused me with Moff Tet is that they call him a lynx god, but he very clearly looks like some kind of lion.
I mean, you're not wrong. Let me go ahead and bring it up. Let's see if I can identify him. Moff Tet. Or Moffat.
Oh, we're looking up like the real Egyptian Moff Tet that this is based on?
No, I'm looking up the character in the show, and for some reason I'm getting... Why am I'm getting odd Yu Yu Hakusho for some reason in the search. I don't know why.
It's the eternal struggle.
Yeah.
Well, Wikipedia says that Moff Tet was a goddess. So I think that was a trap.
Yeah, but like Moff Tet, he doesn't look anything like a lynx. So, is that just part of the fact that he was not worshipped for so long that he lost his spots, his big ears, his massive paws? I don't know. I'm probably overthinking this.
Yeah, I would expand on that. I was almost wondering if he was based off of a lion, like he became weak after people stopped worshiping him and he lost his... That's what I'm going to choose as the explanation. I don't know why he's a lynx god. I don't think he's a lynx god. Whatever. I don't know. He's only in one episode, so it doesn't matter.
They never visit him again.
maybe one last thing I noticed in this episode was I like the chase sequence with the mutants and their like flying machines. It was a little bit like going through the Death Star where they were animating the scenery as they were flying through. And I liked how some of the effects used in the final fight with Mum-Ra, there were some cool effects used for explosions, and the textures on some of the like the statues and the grave had some kind of like odd, I don't know, smoky texture to it. Like maybe they were using glass or paintbrushes or something. And there was also something really sweet, not sweet as in nice, but like sweet as in radical, where Mum-Ra just faded away into like
Dust.
basically dust. So for an episode that's mostly Lionel running around and beating up guys, like the running around and beating people up stuff has to look cool. And I thought it delivered on that. And the only weird story thing for me about it was where he's talking to Jaga and he tells Jaga he doesn't need help. And then he immediately says, wait a minute. And Jaga says, no, you made your choice. Like, what? I was sensing a little passive aggressiveness there. But like I like the theme of Lion-O not needing Jaga. It was just a bit of it was awkwardly paced, I think.
Yeah.
Awkwardly paced, yeah, but at the same time, like, I can understand why he'd make that choice. My dumb self forgot to put the image up this entire time, so you'll have to forgive me on that. But another scene that was in the previous episode I forgot to mention was I love the entire sequence where the mutants try to go over a bridge that isn't there. And they wind up falling into the canyon. Ah, that was funny.
Yeah.
But the end sequence, unfortunately, I really wish the animation had kept up. It's one of the unfortunate times where the animation I wish was higher in its budget or movement than it should have been. But Lion-O taking the crown and having his witnesses and doing all that was neat. But if you actually look in the spectator section, for some reason, and nobody's really sure why, both Hachiman and the ninja are in the crowd spectating Lion-O's anointment.
He just wanted to be. Hey, I mean, it's probably Ninja's day off. I mean, they're like hired mercenaries, show, right?
They are, but at the same time, like Hachiman would not suffer one to be around him. But I'd imagine
he was bringing the ninja to jail and stopped by on the way to taking the ninja to jail.
He's just like poking him in the back of the sword the whole time to better look happy.
You know, in fairness, I've never heard of Hachiman taking anybody prisoner. But he was going to kill Sly. It was Lion-O who told him not to. But no, I'd imagine the truth of the matter is the animation team's like, all right, they need a crowd. Somebody find the secondary characters. Aha, here they are. Wait, what do you mean one of them's a villain? Oh, no. So and at the end, of course, you had that fantastic sequence of the pyramid coming back to life and the cauldron glowing in that really fantastic, shimmering way that I really don't know how they did it. And Mum-Ra, Earl Hammond going, no, you know, oh, Mum-Ra lives. Just fantastic build up to pick up the things right back where they started.
John says Dr. Dome Tome was at the crowning and his hair was brown.
Hey, you gotta get your hair did if you're gonna go to an event. Maybe he just wanted to be pretty, man. Don't be mean. All right. Do we have any other thoughts about the Anointment Trials?
I actually do. The one thing that kind of confused me is it seems like the one thing they really waffled on a lot was the whole they're not supposed to help him, or Lino's not supposed to receive help from any outside source, but he's helped by the Underearth, he's helped by Snow Meow, and the Thundercats are constantly stopping the mutants from interfering, which so I don't exactly know what their reasoning was with that. It seemed to change from episode to episode.
Well, I know for the mutants, Panthro flatly said, you know, we're not supposed to help Lion-O, but those mutants aren't supposed to be involved to begin with. And again, I think this is supposed to, in theory, take place on Thundera only between Thundercats. So other outside forces probably wouldn't be a norm there. Snow Meow mostly helped in repelling the mutants, and at one point dealing with Lion-O, I think before Lion-O was even aware it was Snow Meow. And, you know, you can do really basic stuff for him, but ultimately he's just an animal, so he's going to do whatever he wants.
Right, yeah.
as far as the blind people, I mean, what choice you have there? It's either that or you die.
Understandable.
Ain't no point in trying to do the trials if you're dead. Dead people can't do no trials, unlike the 2011 series will tell you. Yeah, I went there. Any other thoughts?
Lino mans up. I mean, I'm sure we'll see him make mistakes occasionally after this. I'm thinking about how Couch Boys has talked about how she would like to see Lionel make more mistakes. You know, if they redid the series or revamped it, that's a part of his character. And I feel like this is basically a point in his life where he overcomes something so significant that it would kind of change you forever after this. He really earns his spurs as the Lord of the Thundercats in actuality, not just as a mere title.
All right, you have any other closing thoughts, Couch?
I don't think so. I think I pretty much said everything that I wanted.
All right, so now we'll go on to our character retrospective that was requested a few months ago of Zaxx. Marm, what do you think of Zaxx?
Well, for those who don't know, Zaxx, we're told, used to rule the southern hemisphere, while Mumra ruled the northern hemisphere. And Mumra finally got his medal away from him. And if someone wears this medal, it will release Zaxx, and he'll actually take possession of your body. And they say he destroys you to do it. So I guess it's implied that he replaces your soul, or he replaces everything about you, which is kind of creepy. And he's fun. I feel like there's a little bit of Edgar Rice Burroughs inspiration to him because he's green and has 4 arms, kind of like the Martians in the Martian Chronicles. I think that's the right book. John Carter of Mars. That's the book I'm thinking of. And he also has kind of like this fun, I don't know, New Yorkie style, like, "Hey, Mumra, I'm gonna kick your butt," right? That's kind of a fun contrast to Mumra being a bit more of a serious villain.
And what are your thoughts, Couch?
My biggest thing was, okay, I vaguely remembered this episode. I think I remembered Zaxx. I remember his whole thing was, oh, you put on the necklace and he slowly takes over your body, which I thought was really, really cool. As someone who really tends to like horror stuff. But the one thing I did not remember is that Zaxx was from Space Boston. So like as soon as he looked up at Vulture and said, "Oh, you are the ugliest thing I've ever seen," I was on the floor. I had to pause the episode. I had to close the tab because I just mentally checked out. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. But overall, I feel like I can say this about so many Thundercats characters, but I would have really liked to see more of Zaxx, because I mean, they give us a really huge lore bite in this episode that Mumra, for at least a brief period of time, didn't have full control over Third Earth. Half of it was controlled by Zaxx. And I think a villain of that caliber who can stand toe-to-toe with Mumra kind of, I guess, should have gotten more fanfare instead of, oh, Mumra takes his necklace off and they both fall into the cauldron.
You're not wrong. What I find really interesting is Matthew Malik wrote this episode, and he wrote Zaxx, and he wrote these things specifically because he's like, everybody in this show is super serious. Everybody writes everything so serious. I needed something to be funny. So he wrote Zaxx, and he wrote the bookmobile, and he wrote the space library. He's like,
right.
We're going to the tins here. We're going to put Vulture Man in this, and this is how we're going to do it.
He's gonna do a funny little dance. God, I was ready to throttle Vulture Man by the end of that episode. I'm just like, if this stupid bird opens his mouth one more time.
Well, I like although I find it odd that a random flying space mobile would somehow have history about Mumra. We see other pieces of lore that were seeded in earlier, like, you know, that he has a back and forth with Wiz-Ra. You knew that he had a back and forth with Immortus. You find out that he argued a lot. He wound up banishing Brodo to the astral prison. You find that he's been in conflict with other evil forces or even good ones in the past. Like, again, he literally sealed the Lunatax up in lava because he was being a prick. But with Zaxx specifically, you can look at this character like, all right, he ruled this hemisphere. But he's not the same type of evil as Mum-Ra is. Mum-Ra is a type of demonic, satanic evil, whereas Zax's just a prick. He is from Space Boston. He's the guy. I'm walking here. All right, I'm walking here. I'm gonna nuke you. I'm gonna nuke you. Get out of my face. I gotta go get a pizza. That's the type of evil Zaxx is. He's the guy down the road. He's the guy down the road that breaks every HOA law and leaves his trash scattered. And when you ask him to pick it up, what are you? What are you trying to take over my hood? No, I want you out of here. You're ugly and get out of my face. That's the type of guy Zaxx is.
Something I like about that is you've seen that type of character before, but it's usually like a mook or one of the guys who just like beats up people. And Zaxx is an emperor, basically. He ruled half the world. So I like the combination of godlike power with that attitude, right?
And look, Mum-Ra wanted Wiz-Ra's helmet, right? Wiz-Ra himself, Mum-Ra couldn't care less about. He just vanished Brodo. He just doesn't like Immortus. Zaxx, he got into a hand-to-hand altercation with it, wound up in the cauldron and making it explode. He hated that guy. That was hilarious. You've never seen Mum-Ra hate harder than that against another enemy, and I just found that great.
Definitely. There's also like the fun dimension of Snarf almost being possessed, but then gaining basically martial arts prowess from Zaxx. He really is just like a martial arts centric villain. Yeah, I can rule the world, but I just like to personally kick everybody's butt who gets in my way. It's fun.
I'm walking here.
And maybe another weird word building thing is that he has like an eagle head, which is very Egyptian-esque. Like there's always like little, hints.
It's based on Ibis. That's why.
There we go. Like you always wonder, I wonder if he was an Egyptian. God, they leave you lots of little nuggets that could potentially be something interesting, and you're never quite sure how it all tied together back in ancient history for Third Earth.
We got Johnny 2x4 saying, with the accent, Zaxx would perfectly fit in the 4Kids anime dub. Shut up, Yugi! You ain't got the heart of the cards. I do. Don't make me come over there and bust your chops.
Then I'm gonna dunk your face straight into the Shadow Realm.
God. All right. Before we lose it, because Zaxx, if I was given reign, I would have so much fun with Zaxx. I would make him the most obnoxious enemy Mum-Ra ever had. Like,
do you have like the book, the Hear the Roar book explanation of Zaxx?
I do, but it's actually really basic. I'll go ahead and read it off like I always do. Zaxx formerly reigned over Third or Southern Territory. Mum-Ra, ruler of the Northern Territories, desired total dominion of the planet and so fought him for this. After his powerful medallion was stolen by Mum-Ra, Zaxx was defeated. In Matthew Malick's second season adventure, The Zaxx Factor, Vulture Man brings about Zaxx's temporary return and he resumes his age-old battle with Mum-Ra before being consumed in the Black Pyramid's cauldron. Malick's script described him as a four-armed super being. Zaxx's head is that of an ibis with a long curved beak and tiny black eyes. Zaxx is able to attach himself to any kind of body, as we shall soon see. The arms are covered in feathers, wings droop from behind. Zaxx wears a large silver medallion chest plate around his neck. That's it. So everything
Bada bing, bada boom.
See, there we go. Hey, I'm walking here with my four arms. He's almost like a super evil version of Karl Bronatanolowski from Aqua Teen Hunger Force.
Maybe he's mad at Mum-Ra because Mum-Ra cursed the Space Red Sox.
All right. Which one of you mummies took my car? All right, we need to get off that. Any other thoughts on Zaxx before we move on to the comic parts we're going to cover?
I'm good.
Bada binged all the bada booms we can for him right now.
Bibbidi bobbidis. All right, so talking about, we're going into the 1990 UK annual, and we're going to cover this time the comic aspects of the animal. I say the comic aspect because unlike the first annual, this actually has a large text story to it too, and I felt like covering all of that would be a bit too much. Now, let's see here.
I wanted to add for some of the creative talent on this book. Gary Conway wrote the script for The Price of Pride, and people might recognize him as a famous Spider-Man writer, still alive today. Jose Delbo, he's drawn Transformers. He's drawn Wonder Woman. This is actually the first comic I've read with Jose Delbo as the artist. So I kind of like learned a little bit about him from this. And the inker was Al Gordon, and I don't know much about him, but I'd say it's an okay illustrated issue. Like, you can tell this was kind of like from the cheaper days of I think it's Marvel Comics, right?
Yeah, Marvel.
That did this one. Yeah, like Marvel was like, you'd hire Marvel basically to just get out some quick comic adaptations of your work. So great talents were working on this. Even though, like, throughout it kind of feels like these are really talented comic creators who are they're just cranking out a real quick comic. So it has its awkward phases, but it's a very fun little Thundercats adventure, and I think people who like the series would dig it. It's really hard to find. You had to go to like some super secret Thundercats fan sites to dig this one up, right?
Yeah, at this point, thankfully, it looks like the website I got these from, thundercatsfans.org, Persia has fixed everything. So it's great.
Awesome.
I'm really glad she came back to that. But real quick synopsis, Price of Pride is Lion-O and Panthro are trying to shore up a defensive wall to make sure they don't get attacked, because in a previous story, Panthro kind of pissed off some rock men very badly. So they're worried they're going to be attacked. And at this time, the Rockmen's prince and a couple of his friends are actually spying on them from below the wall. And the ground shifts and the tank becomes incapacitated. But at the same time, the Rock Lord's prince's son gets injured, and his friends think it was deliberate, but a wise man in the Rockmen's dominion said this might be an accident, we need to look into this a little more. But Mumra, in his astral form, shows up. He's like, "No! Honor must be answered for. They have wronged me as well. Go fight them. Are you going to put up with that from them? No." So he winds up baiting them into attacking the Thundercats. And they do, and they wind up injuring Snarf. So now Lion-O's pissed. And it culminates in this massive fight between the two of them, where Lion-O has to let go of his anger and realize he's in the wrong, and hope that the Rock King doesn't kill him. So, Marm, what are your thoughts on that?
I love the dimension of Mumra using their honor or virtue against them. That's one of my favorite things in fiction. Is really, it's kind of like Mumra fulfilling kind of like the devil character archetype, where the way they get you is they find your good qualities, your courage or your nobility or your pride, and then they twist that around and they turn that into a way to manipulating you into doing what they want you to do. So that's Dynamite. I like the Rockmen in general. They feel like they'd be a good fit in this world. And I like the balance of the Thundercats. They don't want to get attacked, so they, build a wall. They are concerned about defending themselves. But there's also a good like diplomacy aspect to a lot of Thundercats stories, where they try to figure out, what the other group's deal is, so that they can make peace with them. I think they just do a good job of like they don't have the Thundercats be simps. Basically, there are a lot of stories where they just say, "Oh, turn the other cheek and everything will be fine." In this instance, they did something wrong. So in order to make peace, they had to take a risk that Lion-O has to lay his life on the line. But it's not the kind of like stereotypical, cartoon plot that every show has. Every show has like a plot where two guys are warring, and then the nice guy comes along and he helps them get along at the end. I thought this was kind of like a nice variation on that plot, so it wasn't as, I don't know, trite as I've seen it done in other shows.
I agree. I think that it's a shorter story in terms of what you would expect. Of course, it's a full issue, but it goes very quickly. I do like that Mumra isn't just, I'm going to show up and cause trouble. It's, I'm going to needle these people. Let me see here. And I'm going to try to prod them using their own biases. And that's a plus. Because seeing Mumra be that deceptive towards people that he probably has nothing else in common with is always interesting to watch. And I don't know if they've ever confirmed or if this is just a failure in terms of writing, but it looks like in this, the Sword of Omens doesn't in the Marvel comics, Sword of Omens doesn't necessarily stop Lion-O from doing dumb things, because in the cartoon it did several times. It stopped him from going after the deer. It stopped him from fighting Hachiman. It stops him from other things. Here, he is wrecking everything with the sword, and it is not stopping him one iota.
So I guess that leads to the question: were they familiar with the lore of the Sword of Omens, or was this something that was kind of left open, where like if you could be an enemy of the Thundercats, it's not going to stop you in that instance? Like if someone's attacking you, who could like what happened in the show was he accidentally attacked Tigra, and the sword shattered because he did that. So is it more an issue that you have to be a Thundercat for the sword's defenses to work, or will the sword not care if you're fighting some stranger who could be a good guy, but it's not the sword's job to try to figure that out?
Well, in the go ahead, Couch.
Oh, thanks. I kind of like to see it as the Sword of Omens recognizing the significance of Snarf, as a member of the team, because it was like, oh wait, one of our team members is injured. I better go, I better go ham.
Well, I know in the cartoon, what you were referring to is the Curse of Balthez, where if you try to use a sword in anger against another Thundercat, it destroys itself.
Yeah.
But when there have been other times where Lion-O's tried attacking a character that's good without him even being aware of it, the sword just shuts down. It doesn't do anything. There are times where a good character will attack him and it will be defensive, like it'll put up a force field, or in the sense of chain of loyalty, it'll help him defend himself without hurting anybody. But that was later on once Lion-O understood the weapon better. But otherwise, it usually just completely shuts down. And Good and Ugly is a good indication of that, when the ugly space alien, pries open the doors to Cat's lair, and Lion-O tries to get the sword to work, and it just shrinks back and refuses to do what he wants it to. So in this case, what primarily set the stage for that in the cartoon was the episode Pumra, which is episode 5, so it was really early on. But in the UK comics, that story wasn't done till later in the run. I think like issue 30 or 40 something. So I don't know if this was just something to sort of offhanded or something that got retconned later on. I don't know. But I do know that I enjoyed the story, especially the moral at the end of it. It's like, learn to look out over the entirety of a situation. Don't be rash. Don't be hot-headed if you can avoid it. Because what was avoided here was bloodshed for just literally no reason but a misunderstanding. It would have been completely tragic. But there was one scene I did enjoy when Lion-O saved Panthro, and they're like, all right, so how do we get the tank out? And they turn to each other and say, you have an idea? Go ahead, Couch.
The thing that I really liked about this is, for a show like ThunderCats that's, very macho, very beat 'em up, I think it's really cool that they kind of have the whole message of, while honor can be good and all, it also can be damaging. Like, okay, Lion-O could have just, beat up the rock guy to get revenge for Snarf, and yeah, that probably would have made him feel good in the moment, but it definitely, wouldn't have been the right decision. And I think the whole message of, sometimes, doing things to, to preserve your pride or, get even just isn't always the best idea.
Absolutely. And that also plays into ego. When it comes to honor is an aspect of ego in one way or the other. And you have two very hot-blooded men, and they wanted to satiate that on their own end for their own ego's sake, and one of them had to be the literal bigger man and drop it. And that's how this story wound up turning out. And of course, Mumra at the very end of it was interesting, because he's like, all right, this didn't work out the way I wanted to. I'm going to go back to plotting. And real quick, one thing I do want to comment on, as you two probably know if you keep up with the channel, I recently got the Super 7 Thundercat figures in. And these figures all come with, secondary heads that you can swap out. And you mentioned something about, Thundercats and macho and all that, and you're right to a point. But at the same time, I'm looking at these, and they don't look very natural when they're all snarly and angry. And I realized through watching the show, more often than not, they have very happy, positive expressions on their faces. So it's just sort of an offhanded comment in my own mind. It's like, why if we do anything or sculpt any faces, why do we always make them look super hardcore and grizzled and angry when their more natural expression is generally upbeat and happy?
Because I my personal theory is I think when people take a first glance at Thundercats, that's probably like what they assume the show is about. Like when I said the show is like, oh, a macho like beat 'em up '80s cartoon, I just meant that as like a very very general like term to describe the genre.
Oh, I get that.
That's not. Yeah, like not it's not at all what the show is about, and it's part of the reason why I like Lion-O so much. Protagonist is because he's not like that. But yeah, it's like why can't they just let him smile in one of them? I've never seen a figure where he's actually like smiling, even though in this show like 90% of the time that's what he's doing.
What we need are a set of Thundercat laughing heads, like happens at the end of almost every single episode. That's what we need.
Yeah.
Unironically. Anytime you have anything else to say about this specific comic?
I like the Pebbleheads gag, and how at the end, like once they realize we have to stop calling them Pebbleheads.
Yeah, Snarf and your pseudo racism.
Snarf's Twitter account has been suspended for using incorrect.
We must cancel Snarf now.
Some tweets have been hidden.
His account's been locked. All right, so we're moving on to the final comic that we're covering, which is called The Homecoming, and thankfully it's nothing like The Return. So the synopsis here is that it is Ramastide, and if you guys want, I've got an entire Thundercats Thunderfacts video that talks about Ramastide. And Ramastide is ultimately, for lack of a better word, Third Earth Christmas. And it's not in the traditional sense. I'll comment on that shortly here, Grim. It's not in the traditional sense where there's a Santa Claus or anything like that. It's apparently just a wintertime celebration of people in the ancient past of First Earth rising up and getting rid of Mum-Ra from his position of power before, nuclear holocausts and all that. So, for some reason, you have this character who, I can't believe they named him what they did. I can't.
I know what you're talking about.
The character's name that shows up on Cat's Lair, for some reason trying to sell Snarf on a vacuum cleaner and other things, his name is Poontang.
Wait a minute, Lyle. I think you mean Clemuel Poontang. Thank you very much.
Why did they name him that?
Maybe the original plot was a little more X-rated at first. It's like, hey kid, want to buy a DVD?
And here's the kicker, like, the art's not very good. I'm just going to be blunt about that. Grim noticed that. But I've never seen Snarf just go ham on somebody. He is beating this dude with a frying pan because he's making a mess. And I don't have to
also like
go ahead.
How... Oh, go ahead.
I think what you're saying is about what I'm about to say, so you go ahead.
Okay. My favorite part is at the end where it's like the entire Thundercats team, like the main team, Tower of Omens team, just looking at him. He's like, oh, you're not listening to me, are you? And then the next scene is him just face down in a snowdrift, which implies that these, like, giant cat people with super strength just beat the hell out of this little gnome because it annoyed them.
The only time...
Don't be a door-to-door salesman is the moral of this story.
The Thundercats have put up with devil priests. They have put up with ethereal evils. They have dealt with the spirit of fear. But if you are a door-to-door salesman, they will regularly bully you.
I just imagine the voice of Wes Weasley from the old 90s Sonic the Hedgehog cartoon for that guy the whole time.
Oh, no.
Just completely smarmy. It's weird that they don't use him. It's a little, like, 4-page story, basically, right? Like, normally he would be, like, a subplot, and then they'd go get in trouble, and he'd have to, like, I don't know, vacuum cleaner salesman Mum-Ra or something. Whereas in this, he just, like, shows up, he annoys Snarf, they go have Christmas dinner, and they stuff him in the snow. It's a little side gag.
I've got to do this. Snarf, what happened? Who is this? Someone who's going to spin Ramastide in enough bandages to make Mum-Ra look like a beginner. Snarf. Freaking savage.
I mean, he's throwing dirt around his house. I mean, that's the one thing. You don't want to get Snarf's house dirty.
Snarf, his mom confirmed.
No, there's no chanclas involved. But like, again, I don't know what's going on with the art here. The art is bad.
I feel like some people, like, they can be an okay artist, but that doesn't necessarily mean they can capture what makes Rankin Bass work. Like, what makes Rankin Bass work is that it's got kind of like this funky children's book illustration quality to it. And for this, like, Poontang, Poontang actually has kind of like a funky, gnomish look, but the Thundercats don't look that stylish, and Snarf just looks like a little freaky lizard man, right? I don't know. Maybe I think there has to be maybe like a quality of whimsy or cuteness to Snarf that doesn't quite come across in anything in this short.
Yeah, but it's just bad. I mean, I'm looking currently at the panel where they're all angrily looking at him, and it's an entire mood. That's all I can really say. And
my favorite panel is on page 61 where Lion-O is talking to Linkso, and he just has like, he looks like the handsome face Squidward meme.
His eyes so small. They took like all of her face markings. I didn't even realize that.
Couch, I dare you to take the picture of Bengali scowling at Poontang and use that as a profile picture.
Where it's it'll be like 2 pixels because it's so hold on, let me zoom in on this because I remember I didn't want to look at this like too closely. Oh my god, his head looks like a maple leaf.
It does.
I mean, to be fair, as a simp who's drawn this man many a time, I can't figure out how his hair works either. But like, I'm also not being paid to make like a professional comic.
God, look at Linkso. I don't even know what's going on with Snarf there. Like, they phoned this one in. Like, I try to be as objective as possible. I do love Thundercats, but good lord. I am totally subjecting you to this later, Grim. I'm totally subjecting you to this. I will make you look at this ugly thing.
We gotta do, I will say, that is the one thing, while I love the UK comics from story writing perspective, I feel like a lot of the time the art is kind of on the weaker side, I guess, to put it nicely. Like, I think the problem with this one is they just tried to make them look too realistic. Like, Lion-O looks like an orange fruit by the foot, but like a man. He looks old. I think that's the part. He just looks too old. I don't know what happened to Myra's eyes. They all look kind of scrawny, I guess.
Yeah, and like, if you go page by page, like the art just completely devolves.
Yeah, Snarf looks like a demon.
Now, to be fair, I've always thought in comics, if you were going to phone it in on the art, phone it in on the art on the backup story. Don't phone it in on the art on the up and front story.
Well, thankfully, that's what they did here, because this is absolutely a backup story.
I actually think I do want to use this, like, I don't know, like big Roman general nosed Lion-O as a reaction pic. If you can't show that to the audience on Discord, I'll post it on Twitter.
You'll have to post it on Twitter, because if I were to try to mess with it, it's gonna muck up the rest of the stream currently.
One thing that they might have done is if you had like a standard way, like you draw a few standard faces, so you draw like big tough guy face for some bad guy in Star Wars, and then they give you the Thundercats comic and think, okay, Thundercats. Well, I know he's the big strong guy. Okay, I'll use my big strong guy face, and it doesn't work.
It almost looks like, for Lion-O's reference, the dude used the face of Lou Ferrigno for some reason. I'm sorry, I had to say it. But, all right, any other thoughts about this comic?
Read it for the lulls, and don't worry, it's so short that by the time you're really getting annoyed, it'll already.
Any from you,
Yeah,
Couch?
yeah, actually, the one thing I think is kind of odd is that they didn't do more holiday special stuff, especially Christmas. Because, I mean, the production company is Rankin Boss, who's the same people responsible for, all the old school, like, stop motion specials that run on ABC.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Freeform, my bad. Like Year Without a Santa Claus, stop motion Rudolph, Jack Frost. So like it kind of surprised me, albeit they did these a lot earlier than they did ThunderCats. But it kind of surprised me that ThunderCats didn't have like some kind of official special.
It actually doesn't surprise me because you got to keep in mind who did the treatment and who wrote the game plan for this was Leonard Starr, and when he sticks to a genre, he sticks to a genre. So for an Earth two nuclear holocausts removed from our own, the concept of the holidays that we celebrate now would probably be non-existent, and certainly wouldn't mean anything to a literal foreign entity. Hello.
Hello, you there?
Ah, there you are. I thought I lost everybody.
Okay.
Yeah, were we good?
Yeah, that was weird. Anywho, if we don't have any other questions or any other comments left for the comic, I'll go ahead and address the chat here because we've had a couple of posts. Let's see here.
Trin Grafer, did you read Trin Grafer's comment?
I'm going from the top to the bottom, so give me a bit here.
Okay.
All right, John Confield said, if Lion-O failed the Anointment Trials, would Tiger take his place? Technically, yes. Lion-O has made it very clear that if he were to fail at anything or die, Tiger would take his place. He's also the head of the ThunderCats Council. While I personally would be more fond of Panthro, I don't think he would want that headache. Let's see here.
Being the coolest Thundercat doesn't necessarily mean you have the attitude to want to do all the administrative stuff.
Correct.
Right.
Are Burbles cyborgs with actual meat or just robots with faux fur? By Rogue Scholar. I don't really know because in some other stories you look at them and assume that they're mostly metal, but they biologically reproduce. The entire reason why they're on Third Earth is because they overpopulated their planet. I want you to sit there and understand that has to sound like something, and I'm going to leave it like that. There's no way in heck Lion would be Panthro in a natural fight. You might be surprised, depending on which form of Lion we're talking about here. Do you think 2011 ThunderCats would make a return just like Samurai Jack did? No, it would not. Number one, the main animation director, Daniel Norton, has made it very clear that even if it did get picked up, he would not be interested in coming back to it. He's more interested in his own projects now, and he's moved on from there. Warner Brothers has made sure that thing is completely killed, dead in the water. They would not be able to pick it back up. Samurai Jack was animated primarily in-house at Warner Brothers, whereas ThunderCats 2011 was animated by Studio 4 Degrees Celsius, so no, it's not coming.
Like you'd have one of the things about Samurai Jack was that was Jenny Tartakovsky coming back to his baby, and you don't really have like a parallel situation. Like I'd be more willing to come back to something I created than to some property I'd been hired to work on that I didn't create.
Let's see here. Plank also says, I like that Warner Brothers is so incapable of handling the franchise. They take everything that was so popular and well beloved and just turn it into lowbrow comedy. Yeah, they never did know how to do anything with this. Let's see here. All right, what comment did you want me to take a look at, Marm?
It was towards the bottom. I've got it. Trin Grafer had a comment on the Homecoming comic. It looks like a Marvel movie comic where they do drawing of real people, but the Thundercats were animated. How did they go that far off model? And my thought was just that, like at this time period, like they just hire these guys and they crank out, 10 stories a week or something like that. So they wouldn't be looking at the reference material too closely. That's why you'll see Star Wars comics where, they're running around talking to, talking rock people and all kinds of weird stuff. Is part of the fun is a lot of the comics of this era were just sort of weird and off the wall, but they almost definitely would you would be lucky if they had maybe like a couple reference images of the Thundercats and then just based everything off that. Like they couldn't even Google different pictures of the Thundercats to get a feel for the character. They'd probably just have like a couple concept art pieces, if that, or maybe toys.
Plank asks, was Rob Liefeld a part of this? Well, no, because you can clearly see some actually drawn feet there. And Chitara doesn't look like her spine's about to break and her boobs are everywhere. So no, thankfully Rob Liefeld had nothing to do with this.
Poor Rob.
Stephen Queen said to not look at the reference pictures. I guess this is what Maddie Super 7 pictures model after his comic. It wouldn't surprise me if we ultimately get something like that because these figures are not worth the $45 per figure that people paid for them. All right, so we've covered all of our topics tonight. So let's see here. Next time we're going to go over, let's see, what are 2 episodes that happened in the middle of the Anointment Trials since we skipped those to just cover the trials themselves. Let's see here.
Let me bring it up on my end.
The Demolisher and Monkeyin's Bargain.
Oh, Demolisher. It's got the funky little drum man.
Yes.
I remember about that. That's all I remember about that episode.
Demolisher wins again.
Oh, yeah. All right.
That guy.
Nice.
Funny.
All right, so we'll cover that, and we'll do the text story called The Last ThunderCats Story from this UK annual next time. Now, what hero do you guys want us to cover for next month? I think John Caulfield wants...
Who's left?
Looks like John Caulfield may want us to cover Termagar, the Tuscan, so we'll see about that. And while we wait for the chat...
I'd be okay with that one.
I would too, but while I wait on chat, I'm going to go traumatize Grim with some images.
That's the other reason we got to get more people interested in ThunderCats. Is there's so much meme potential that hasn't been tapped into yet. We have to introduce Zoomers to all the cool shows so they can start making crazy Zoomer humor memes out of them.
Oh yeah, I was actually going back and forth with one of my friends on Twitter, King Hissy. They were in the chat a while ago.
Oh yeah, King Hissy's great.
Yeah, I've got one to show you guys after the chat.
Oh Lord.
Because there's like a whole like little paragraph of context I have to go through for it, but
the episode that's not quite up on the list yet, John. Let's see here. Was it literally so hard to look at a model for this comic? Like, come on, man. I actually don't know about anything concerning the background of this comic. I know oddly in the annuals there's individual drawings of the ThunderCats there, but they're not really on model either. Okay, John's actually recommending that we cover Linksana. That'd be interesting.
She was a UK comic exclusive, right?
She was a comic exclusive in general. She also showed up in the American comics, but she got an expanded role in the UK ones. Because
wow, I'll have to do some comic reading to do that one.
Thankfully, you won't have much you need to read.
Okay.
And this is something that Go ahead.
Did the comics have a habit of just introducing a character and not ever bringing them back either?
Sometimes. But Linksana actually has a couple of times she reappears. I think a couple of comic stories in the UK as well as text stories. But you'll see her first foray in some of the early Marvel run comics. She's a... we'll get into that later. I don't want to spoil that. Fidame extraordinaire. I don't get it. All right, so if that's all we've got, we'll go ahead and cover all of that next time. Let's see here. Could you one day go back to the comic where Lion-O and Chitara go back in time? Yes, that's actually covered in one of the annuals, so we will eventually get to it. Trust me. All right, so we thank you for your time. We're going to go ahead and cut it off here, and you guys have a good night.
Thanks for having us on. It was a blast.
Yeah, I love doing this.
Later, guys.
See ya.